So AV, do you want to move forward with the talking about what are we going to leave behind and how people are going to plan for their estate?
Sure. So I was just watching your presentation, Scott, and it made me, gave me something to look forward to. I'm still at the upsizing phase and gathering junk, and I look forward to being able to move out to one of those beautiful locations that you showed.
Yeah.
My job is to help people with those transition phases and to help plan appropriately for them. A lot of times a house is a person's major asset, and to really deal with that in a wise way is smart, and that's where estate planning comes into the picture. So when people have families, you want to consider what to do with the house or the proceeds of the house, and if there's anything left over, are people going to use that to live? But ultimately, when people make a will, it reflects their current situation. So if anything happens now, what's going to happen to the house? Any of the assets that you've accumulated. And things get interesting when people have multiple assets, like you mentioned, perhaps a holiday house in Florida. I don't know if that's going to be their primary residence, or they're going to be based out of Ontario and that's going to be a holiday residence, or if it's all local, having multiple properties. You have to plan accordingly for that, both according to the next generation and what's going to be a primary residence, where you're going to spend most of your time. Things could get interesting when people have blended families. Statistics show that, there's like a 50% divorce rate or something like that. So it's reasonable that by the time people are looking to downsize, they're in their second or even third marriages, and maybe there's children from multiple marriages. So all these are situations that come into play, not only when you're downsizing, but when you're planning what to do with your estate and how you're going to consider all these assets and people in your life, so that things are done as fairly as possible, and how you want them to be done ultimately, to reflect your wishes and how things stand. The worst kind of situations is when people pass, or if they pass without doing the right planning, either without a will altogether, and then things just get distributed according to the law and not necessarily how they wanted their estate to be distributed. And I can go into that if you want. Also I've seen is an outdated will, which is another problem, and it doesn't reflect their current circumstance. So these are opportunities when people are downsizing, is to look at their estate, look at their assets, take a snapshot of their family, and a will is also, it's like a snapshot, a picture, so to speak, of a current circumstance. So during these transition moments, estate planning documents need to be updated to reflect the new circumstance. So there's all sorts of issues we deal with, and if anyone has questions about kind of how things play out according to the law, if they don't have a law, if they don't have a will, it's quite rigid, but I can go into that a little bit. But the best thing to have is ultimately a document that reflects how you want things to be distributed. Another thing, and I'm a estates lawyer at Kormans, and Kormans is a very strong real estate law firm. Jonathan's a real estate guru over there, and like I was saying, a lot of people, their major asset is their house. So estates and real estate often mix. There's usually a big real estate component in estates, and an estate comes into play. It usually involves real estate. So they're interchangeable or relatable issues and areas of law, and they usually overlap in a lot of circumstances.
Yeah, what I find in my business in real estate is that there seems to be a lot of people that don't have wills in place, and they just didn't do it, or they didn't expect to pass away, and it leaves kind of a situation behind, that for everybody. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so surprisingly, something like 50% of Canadians don't have wills.
Really?
And with the amount of education there is out there, and I consider Canadians quite financially sophisticated. A lot of people are planning for their retirement regarding their wealth and insurance and everything, but wills for some reason slip by the wayside. So that stat at 50% is quite alarming, that 50% pass away without a will. And what happens there, like, luckily the law is there to protect you, and the law says, your spouse ultimately would get things, and your children, and if you don't have a spouse and children, then it would go to your parents, and then your siblings, and uncles and aunts and their children, and next of kin, and the sad situation, if somebody has no family, then it ultimately goes to the state.
Right.
And that's I've seen happen before. And just about all that is it's a safety net. The law is there as a safety net, that you die, it goes to your family. But like I said, there could be an estranged child that you don't speak to, and you prefer to give your wealth and property to a child that is there, that has been there helping you for all these years, or one person over the other, whatever it may be. Or maybe you're in a new marriage or a common law kind of relationship, and then it'll go to your former spouse as per the law. It could get all sorts of messy, occurrences which are not according to a person's wishes. Right. So that's really where a will comes in, and you go through and you ask tough questions, and find out what a person really wants. And I find at the end of the whole process, people are usually so relieved, because they feel a certain peace of mind that now I know what's going to happen, and this is according to my wishes. So
right.
It's nice to help people get to that point, but it's always surprising that people go so long without a will. So I find a mission in what I do, and enjoy it very much.
Yeah, there must be some other reasons that people don't have a will, because they just don't want to tackle the conversations that they have to have around how things are going to be split up. And especially in blended families, right, where you've got it's a little bit more complex. But I think probably a lot of people avoid wills just because they don't want to have the conversations with their spouses and their family.
Well, we can have some great stories for you of appointments that we've seen on that very topic.
Yeah.
Right, Abby?
Yeah, sure. People are concerned. I started my career in life insurance and insurance, and it's the same kind of effect that people have. They're not really interested, and it takes a lot for them to overcome that sort of fear. But again, once they do that and they deal with these important matters, they're really thankful and feel a sense of relief. And it's so important to get done. It's just pushing off, the unfortunate if they don't.
Right.
So,
right. So how does somebody get started then, if they're trying to figure out, how to get a will, in place? Where do they start?
So the best is to reach out to a lawyer like myself, or an estates lawyer. I'll just make one comment before we go there, and that is that when you talk about estates lawyers, I'm an estate lawyer. It's split into two different kinds. One is a litigation lawyer and a planning lawyer. Estate planning and estate litigation. Wow. And they're very much clearly down the middle, whereas estate litigators deal with the mess, where people don't have a will, or the will is contested, or there's some sort of issue. And then there's me, which is a planning lawyer, and that's making sure that the litigation doesn't happen. So if you plan properly and everything's documented, you avoid the second type of issues that will may come up later, the litigation, which everyone wants to avoid. Right. So that's what proper planning does. Mm-hmm. And the way we do that is ultimately discovering the person's wishes in as detail as possible. And it involves asking very difficult questions. Usually we start with a questionnaire that kind of gets the client thinking about who's going to be what. They ultimately need to list roles in their will. Who's going to be the executor? Who's going to take care of things? They're going to list beneficiaries. Who's going to receive things? Are they going to receive things outright?
Right.
Are they going to receive things in trust? Are they going to impose certain conditions over there? If they have minor children, is there going to be any guardian in place? And then you can go on and on about any sort of conditions you want to put in place. And that really depends on the client and their circumstance.
Okay.
And that's why the process is really about drawing out from the client what they want and finding out about them as people, their family circumstance, their financial circumstance, and trying to guide them through to get to what's best for them. So we actually use this kind of video conference technology a lot.
Right.
Zoom, and like you shared your screen with us and showed a presentation, I share my screen and I build out a family tree for the client, and I go through a different questionnaire, which is quite visual and easy to use. Like it makes difficult concepts really user-friendly and easy to understand. For example, trusts versus absolute distributions, and then it lists different conditions. So it helps clients work through the estate planning process.
Right.
And having the visual, using the technology is really a helpful tool. Having the camera and the microphone helps, and that's really how we do it. And then since COVID happened, luckily the Law Society has been very progressive and has helped us go through the whole process and even sign the documents of a video conference like this.
Right.
So I have, wills over here, and the clients sit there with their video,
right.
and we each sign the documents, and then, I have to compile them afterwards. But that's been a savior to everybody, not only us as lawyers, but clients who need wills and they're stuck at home, unable to come to the lawyer's office. So, sometimes we sit on a video call like this for an hour or two or three,
right.
or multiple calls, and however long it takes. And, that we send draft documents back and forth until they're right.
Sure.
And that's the process for now.
Yeah, for sure. It's now one thing that I wanted to get a comment from you before we move on to Heather is baby boomers are inheriting a lot of money. They're like, parents of baby boomers lived through a pretty good time of their lives and high income earning. And a lot of that inheritance is coming to boomers. How is that part of estate planning, and how does that play out for families of boomers?
It's a very, very good question. And that really fits into their whole estate plan. That'll form part of their estate. And call it the residue of their estate, which is, their estate ultimately. And unless it's a specific asset, let's say they inherit an apartment or a property, then they can decide what to do with that specific property. Or if it's just a big chunk of wealth, they can decide, who they want to leave it to. I've seen some clients with a lot of wealth decide they want to leave a large portion of it to charity. To nieces and nephews. You can kind of go through with the client how far they want to spread it out if that's their issue. Hopefully it should be all of our issue, but
right.
When people inherit money, there are tax considerations which we go through. So not to get into too much detail here, but we touch upon every asset and look at this property and look at this bank account and look at this RSP and look at this TFSA and look at, every asset and go through the tax implications of those assets. And, if there's an inherited property there, we can look at the tax implications there and what they want to do with that asset or property. So, it's a great problem to have when people have a lot of assets. And it's a lot of work for us as estate lawyers to just go through all those assets and figure out what's best to do for that client and the family and the asset, etc. So the more the merrier.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you want to also discuss there the role of the accountant, financial planner, insurance planner, and how we fit in there?
Sure. So a lot of people, especially if they have corporations, would include their accountant in the tax planning process, and then the accountant generally comes to us with a memo giving their tax advice, and then we review and implement the memo. So that's an added process that, you know, if accountants give clients advice, we're the ones who implement that advice, you know, and the advice could vary, usually involving shares and corporations. You know, I do a lot of corporate wills. If people have a corporation on the side, usually baby boomers, you know, in this presentation, they've wound up their corporations already. But if people have corporations still, then, you know, you need that secondary will, and then you avoid probate tax on that secondary will. Mm-hmm. So there's all sorts of probate and tax planning strategies, and tax is a big part of it, but it's the kind of thing that it's very client specific. Mm-hmm. You know, if needed, you bring in the accountant, like Jonathan said, and you get a whole holistic approach.
Right. And I guess, you know, to do that early on is better than leaving it to the end, because the tax implications of not dealing with things could be quite large, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And just one comment on that is that a lot of people, a lot of times people want to do what they feel is right. And sometimes people feel like, you know, I have a property, I want to give it to my one child who's been so good to me, or whatever it is. And they don't realize that, you know, these dispositions are taxable. Mm-hmm. And, you know, sometimes just what they feel is right based on the circumstance. You know, we kind of, as estate planning lawyers, look ahead and say, what happens if? And you know, often you don't want to pull the trigger on transferring property unless there's really good reason to do so.
Right. Right.
We get asked all the time between real estate and wills and estates. So maybe I should be smart about it. Maybe I should put my kids now on title and avoid probate. Then that's the route I'm going to go. And that's where, you know, that can open up a whole other can of worms, depending on how long the child holds the property for, when they sell it. There's deemed disposition. So there's a lot of consideration. There is not necessarily one clear solution. That's why we have to run through many options with the clients.
Right. Okay, awesome. Okay.
Yeah, and as a financial planner, I think that's important to for clients, you know, to let me know, and to let you know as a estate lawyer, and who their other advisors are, so we can all work together. Because if I'm saying one thing and the accountant's saying something else and you're saying something else, who are they going to, you know, they're just going to kind of say, okay, whoever I trust the most, but really we should all be on the same page, you know, in addition to the person helping them buy and sell a property as well. So, so as a financial planner, which, you know, just before we get into my part, there's a lot of people that call themselves financial planners, but they're really just investment advisors. So as a true planner, I do fee-for-service planning. I help people with the overall components of the planning, as opposed to just, you know, selling a product, because at the end of the day, that's kind of the smaller piece. It's all the planning that's important.
Sure.
And, you know, I'm sure, Abby, you see, you know, the messes. You know, I wish people would, you know, understand that there is estate planning lawyers, not just, you know, litigation lawyers. So,
yeah.
So right. Use, you know, and it's good to have a team, because then you know that you're looking out for the client's best interest. So.
I agree 100%. It's always better to work with a team, and there's some of your skills, Heather, that, you know, are needed and I lack. So it's always best to have that financial advice on board, and financial planning, and you bring a lot of skills. So the more advice that we have, as long as they're all in sync, is great.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Well, so one thing I was going to say, Heather, and you probably, I assume you see this a lot, is when we tell the clients about the advice and things to consider, but very often they may go and do things with different professionals, and then they come to us after the fact, and now we got to go and fix it. And fixing is not always so easy. There could be tax ramifications for that. So it's a lot easier when we can do this from square one versus having to go after the fact.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you want me to share my screen now? I
Yeah,
guess?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, Jonathan, can you show us your pillow?
When I was about 6, 7 years old, this was my hero, Mr. T.
All right.
And when I was growing up, this is who I wanted to be. So I'm still working on it. The hair is almost there, but I don't have the chains or the muscles quite yet.
All right. Looks good.
Thank you.